Hey guys, so this video is how I do my F2L cases, but not exactly on how I pair them. I have a few videos on that already, and you can check the description for those links. And I also have the F2L PDF, which you shouldn't learn from. You should mostly learn from the advanced F2L tutorial, but it's useful to use that resource to check if your solutions are good. In this video, I'm talking about how I do my F2L cases, but with focus on how I do the finger tricks, not on how I pair them. So I'll mostly be talking about back slots, but I just want to say that what's more important if you don't already do this is front slots. So that's not the main topic of this video, but just to get this out of the way, make sure that when you're doing front slot inserts, you always start in the home grip, which is having both of your thumbs on the front. For example, L prime, U prime, L for this case, you don't regrip to have a comfortable U prime like this. Instead, you do U prime a different way, which is either like this or like this. And if you don't know these yet, I recommend watching the finger tricks tutorial. So that means that anytime you have front slot stuff, you will always do this without regrips and always starting in the home grip. Okay, now let's talk about back slots. Back slots are a little bit different because normally you'll be lifting up a back slot which puts your hand into the bottom position if you start in home grip. And from here you can still do turns with the other hand, but it's hard to do turns in the opposite direction. This is too weird to actually use practically, and you don't have that pinch turn available to you anymore. Instead, you have to use your other hand, which is either like this or like this. And both of these are pretty awkward to do quickly if you have your other hand in this position. So just to give an example, if I'm doing this pair into the back left slot, what people normally do for this, just to show the intuitive side, is to insert the corner and then do this F2L case, which is like this. So when that is a back slot, then you have to regrip, or you can not regrip and use a bunch of awkward moves. So just to show the regrip, I start by putting my thumb at the top, which is true for a lot of back slot cases. Then I would just insert that corner and do the rest of it like this. But instead, if I were to do this without regrips, which is very awkward to do, it would look like this. And trying to do this or this many times is just slower, even when you take into account the fact that you won't be regripping. So in this video, I'll be talking about when it is worth it and not worth it to do the regrip. Because obviously doing a regrip is worse, but doing a lot of this is even worse than a regrip. The first thing I'll talk about is unnecessary regrips. So remember, all front slot regrips are unnecessary because you should always start in the home grip. But for back slots, assuming you never want to do that awkward type of move, then there are many situations where a regrip is necessary, but often it's not necessary. A common bad habit I see keepers do, which is not a very big deal if you're like more starting out, but if you're like sub 20, then this is something you should eliminate. And that is when you have a pair here that could be inserted into the back slot, but you regrip to start just because it's a back slot. So in this case, we can start in the home grip and everything is okay. And then of course there are cases where the regrip is necessary. In this case, regripping is fine. So for this case, we have this starting with a U here. If I didn't do that, it would look like this, which is more awkward. And then there are also times where you can pick a different intuitive way to solve a case that reduces the regrips. So for example, for this case, how you can do it without regrips is by hiding the corner and moving the edge to the right spot, and then inserting. As you can see, there were only U prime moves here, so there was nothing awkward. But instead, another intuitive way to do it, which is not the right way to do it for a back slot, is when you put it like this and hide the edge instead. Now you'll have to do the regrip to move the corner this way. And then from here, there's no more regrips, but there was a regrip in the beginning and it was unnecessary because you can just solve it in a different way. Also, if you have U2 moves, make sure you pick the hand that requires no regrips. For example, for this case going into the back, I see a lot of people do R prime U2 like this, and then the rest of it is like okay. But if you think about it, to get rid of a regrip, all you have to do is R prime like this and do U2 with the other hand. So as long as you pick the correct hand to do U2, you usually can save a lot of regrips. The next way to avoid regrips is by doing a U2 insert. So for example, we have this pair here, it's going into the back slot, and how we can insert this is instead of doing U2 regrip to do R prime UR, we can instead just put it over here. And then we don't have to regrip because now we are inserting it with the U2, and that can be done with the left hand instead of the right hand. And this is especially important for cases like this, where after you pair them, often if you were doing it from the front, you would do this and insert. But if you're doing this case from the back, after pairing them up, you should instead just move the F2L pair over here, and then you can insert it without a regrip. Now here's a common case that I see people do a lot of different things for, but in my opinion, unless you're trying to influence other slots and do like super advanced stuff, there's only one right way to do this case. So from here, you can pair them up like this, and now you have some choices. You can either do U prime to take it out, or you can do U2. And the correct way is U prime because it puts the pair right here. So you should know what to do with this next. You will insert it into the back using U2. If instead you took this out using a U2 to begin with, then you will have to insert it into the back using either an awkward move, which is okay if you like that, or you have to do it like this. And what's even worse is I see some people take it out and then do this move and then move it into the back, which is just extra moves. So don't do that. Then we have this case. A lot of people from the front will do 3 sexy moves, but I think a lot of the more advanced solvers know that it's usually faster to do 3 reverse sexy moves, as it doesn't require you to do the pinch move over and over. But if you get this from the back, if you try to do the reverse sexy move thing, you end up having to regrip first. Otherwise, of course, you have a lot of awkward moves to do. But instead from the back, if you do like 3 sexy moves but mirrored to the back, then I think that's actually better. And that's because you get to start in home grip and there's no awkward moves when you do it. All right, so those are just some basic intuitive ways to change the way you do F2L cases in order to reduce backslot regrips. But moving on to the next way of reducing regrips for backslots, this is just when you use a completely different algorithm to solve the case. So earlier I talked about this F2L case going into the backslot, and I talked about doing it in the way where you insert the corner first and then do this case, which is pretty good if you regrip first and pretty good from the front slot. So for this case, there's a few intuitive ways with one awkward move. For example, if we insert this pair like this, well, not the pair, but just the edge, and then do this case, which is gonna be like this, one awkward move so far, and then insert this with U2. So doing this case again, starting from home grip would look like this. But if you try hard enough, often you can find a way to do it without a regrip or awkward moves. So in this case, you can hold it right here and do anti-soon. And that sets up the case. So again, that would look like this. Now for this F2L case from the front slot, if the back slot was unsolved here, how I would normally do this is just by setting it up like this and then insert. You can do it this way if the back slot is unsolved, you just have to put this back in at the end, but I think that's a little too awkward to do. And I think it's slower than the other way. So the other way is to insert this edge first and then just solve this case. If you don't do that, it looks like a lot of moves, but it's really fast. From the back slot, if you were to do that, you'd have to start with a regrip, otherwise it is definitely slower. So instead, you can do the other case I talked about. Just do this normally, and then insert this pair. And that has no regrip or awkward moves from the back slot. All right, and the last topic of this video is awkward moves are okay sometimes, at least in my opinion. I think everything I said before this part of the video is pretty objective, but the part I'm gonna say now is my opinion, so just keep that in mind. So for a case like this going into the back slot, there is only one awkward move, and that is like this. And then insert. Or you could do it like this. I have different preferences for different hands. If I'm using my right hand, I prefer to do it like this. And if I'm using my left hand, I would prefer to do it like this. But either way, that's only one awkward move, and I think that is actually okay. The reason is because it saves 2 regrips, one at the beginning and one at the end of the algorithm. So I think it's worth it sometimes. So I think on average, it's faster with the awkward move if you do it perfectly because it saves the regrips, but there are times where I wouldn't do it. For example, if I just inserted this slot here and now I see this, then I'm going to rotate. Again, okay, I should rotate so it's a front slot because it's the last slot, but pretend I want it to be a back slot because these aren't solved yet. Then in this case, I would rotate and start this F2L case at the same time. And if I'm going to rotate and do that at the same time, I think that's a little too risky because my hands aren't completely ready yet and I'm doing really weird moves. So here's a situation where the rotation is a regrip anyway, so I'll just take that regrip all the way to here. So essentially what that means is I'm reducing that awkward move, but only having 1 regrip instead of the normal 2. And I mean adding 1 regrip instead of adding 2, because if I were already facing this side, I would go here and then here. But if I was facing this side to begin with, then I would just do 1 rotation like that, and that was a regrip I would have to do anyway, so essentially the first regrip goes away, and afterwards I still have to come back. But I do think that's worth it because it's less risky. The result for how I do F2L cases is now for a lot of them, I have a different way of inserting it into the back slot that doesn't require any regrips. Or if it's a case that does require 1 awkward move, I will do it often, unless it's really weird to do so like I just came from a rotation, then I will just regrip instead. And this is pretty much always true except for cases like this, where I have an edge here and the white stickers on top here. These cases are unique because once you pair them up, you end up with the pair right here. And the problem here is that when you have a pair like this, you typically want to put it here and then do a U2 to insert, but I don't think it's worth it doing all those extra finger movements to get it here, like doing 2 extra U2s, when instead from here, you could just do it like this and do an awkward move, I guess, but I don't really like it for some reason. So for cases with an edge here and the white here, what I normally do is I will just regrip. And just keep in mind that this case falls into the same category because it is also where you move this here, white's on top, and then you end up like that. So just to show the 2 possibilities I'm talking about, if I get this case, then I will usually regrip and do it like this. And the 2 alternatives that have no regrips are doing the U2 insert. I think that's not really faster and a little risky. And the other way is by doing this, which I think is probably also risky. For some reason, in this case, it's really weird to do. I can do it now, but in a solve, I'm not sure if I'd be able to consistently reproduce that. All right, so that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and make sure you check out the advanced F2L tutorial if any of these F2L solutions look foreign to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.